Welcome to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. Inspirational leaders, shared experiences, creating connections. I'm Emma Lurie, and thank you for joining me as I share the journeys, stories and inspiration of amazing educational leaders from all around the world. In this episode, I'm joined by Chilipo Gunda, who joins us from a secondary school in Malawi. He shares some really inspirational thinking around the purpose of education and sustainability and some of the challenges that he faces working in Malawi but teaching the British curriculum. So let's get into it. Hi, Chilipo. It's so great to have you. Thank you so much for giving up a little bit of your time. It is just about lunchtime here in the UK, but you are joining us all the way from Malawi, which is incredible. So if you could just share a bit about you, where you're from, that would be amazing.
All right. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for taking the time to have a chat with me. My name is Chilipo Gunda. I am a senior teacher here at St. Andrews International High School in Malawi. For those of you guys who may not know where Malawi is, it's a small country in the southernmost part of Africa. If you look it up on the map, it's the one that's got the third biggest lake in Africa, and I consider it to be the most beautiful lake in the entire world. And I live in a small city of Malawi, in the southernmost part of Malawi called Blantyre. Lots of trees, beautiful sunshine all the time, and just wonderful people, small community.
Sounds amazing. I definitely need to visit. So we will get on to it a little bit later, your kind of current role, which is in a secondary school, but I'm really keen to find out a little bit more about your own education experience and your own schooling and what that looks like for you, I guess, as a stepping stone to then how you got into teaching. But if you're willing to share with us a little bit about your own schooling, that would be amazing.
Okay, thank you. So for most people who would Google education in Africa, one of the biggest alarming things you find is the statistics of education. And I went through sort of a similar stereotypical kind of education whereby I had a primary school of classes of like sizes. So I went to a primary school, really good primary school, but predominantly large classes of maybe about 50 to 80 students in the class. And then I went from such a setting to now a really small, tiny secondary school. And there were about hundreds of us as students in that school. So it felt more intimate as a school, really great teachers, and it sort of changed my perspective of education because of the background that I had in primary school. And I think in a way, that sort of motivated me to join the education world. Not as a teacher, I'd always known that I wanted to work in education in some context, but not as a teacher. I certainly, if I was to look back or put myself in those shoes back then, I would have never pictured myself to be a teacher. But I certainly knew that at some point in my life, I want to work in education and make a difference in education.
Amazing. So what was that experience of being in, I guess, because you then had your secondary school in a smaller class size, like looking back, what were the differences then around having such large class? Like, how did that change your experience of education? Or how was it different, I guess, to the smaller classes?
It was much more positive. When everyone asked me, like, what's the best time in your life growing up, I would always refer back to secondary school because, as I said, it felt quite intimate in terms of just the friends that I made. All the friends that I made then are still my friends now, my best mates up to now. We had really fantastic teachers who really supported us, and we felt well looked after. And it was a big contrast to the primary school because the primary school just felt painful. When you're in a class that you don't even get recognized, and you had to be sort of unique for you to get recognized. So there were two main ways you could get recognized. You had to either work really hard and be considered as the most clever kid in the class, that you get recognized by the teacher, or you had to be the naughtiest kid in class, and then you get also recognized by the teacher. But if you were someone like me who was sort of average and median in the class, you sort of went throughout the year without being recognized. And I think because of my personality, I thrive on recognition and I wanted to be recognized. And I never sort of had that in primary school. But when that changed to the smaller, much more intimate secondary school, I felt more passionate about education. I felt suddenly the hunger to learn and be educated came in me. And I guess it's the same for all my mates that we met in secondary school. And as I said, even up to now, we're still best of mates.
That's such an important element of our work that, you know, it is really widely recognised. There's a lot of work, certainly in the UK, around relational practice and the value of children and staff feeling belonging in their in their setting of a school or an organisation. But I think those sorts of examples just really clearly highlight how important it is and how it sets children and young people up to learn and to be engaged. And that isn't necessarily always around class sizes. You know, you can have the smallest class in the world, and for some reason that feeling of belonging isn't, or recognition isn't there. But I can see how that comparison is really clear of having those different amounts of people around you. Really fascinating.
And
So
I think,
go on.
no, just saying, and I think as well, just because I wouldn't say the primary school teachers didn't care. I wouldn't say that per se, but I just think it was just in a situation whereby I can picture it. I'm a teacher now, and I can picture being given a class of 70 kids to teach. Even if I had the biggest heart in the world, it's just impossible. So yeah, just to rectify that I wouldn't say the teachers didn't care. I think they cared a lot, but it was just that impossible task of giving your heart to all the kids that you have in the class.
Yeah, I mean, what a massive job on your hands. I mean, for the first school that I was head at, we had about that many children, sort of 70, 80 children in the whole school. So it would have been like me teaching all the children that came to assembly with me, like that many children. You're right. I mean, it's a big job taking on a class of children. I don't know what your class sizes are like in secondary, but in the UK we're around 30, and primary is kind of the norm. And even that is a lot. I mean, I quite regularly sit at home with my 2 children that I'm attempting to look after, not to educate necessarily in terms of academics. You know, it's really quite hard to control that, let alone, you know, give all of that. It's so complex, isn't it, the job that we do as educators, and the amount of children that we have absolutely dilutes or serves them. So it's an interesting thing to think about. So what happened next for you in terms of getting into education and thinking about that as a career choice?
Thank you. So eventually I finished high school, and well, with that big moment in life when you're deciding what route you want to take, my initial gut instinct was going to medicine, because I don't know about the UK, but in Africa, every child is taught by their parents, you need to work hard in school for you to either become a lawyer or a doctor. So that sort of brainwashed me to the point that when I was finishing high school, I was so dead set on becoming a medical doctor. So I applied for university. Now, the funny thing about universities then was that there were only a few universities in Malawi. And all of a sudden, you'd have thousands of kids who are applying to these very few spots in your university. So I applied for medicine as a degree of choice, first choice, and I wasn't picked into that. And then what would happen is, if you were not picked for a particular course, the system would automatically direct to the nearest sort of fitting course for you. So I call it by accident, I got put into an education course, a bachelor's education degree majoring in science, because I think they looked at my application and must have thought, this kid likes science, he can't be a doctor, just make him a teacher.
And then you can teach the doctors of the future.
Exactly.
I can see where the program was thinking.
Yeah, so I went into university and started studying for education. But my first few years of my degree, I was like, I know I've always wanted to be in education, but I don't want to be a teacher. So my sort of plan then was finish your degree and then decide whether you want to go back and do another degree in medicine. But my heart then was saying, actually, if I was to go into medicine, I would want to practice. I want to be in academia and I want to train other doctors. Or the other plan was maybe stick with university and then teach and lecture in a university. And then I went to my first school, and that all changed. I went to my first school was quite similar to my secondary school. It was a really small, new school. It was 5 years young. And it had about, when I went, it had about 90 kids. And by the time I was leaving, it had about 160 kids. So quite small school, intimate, had a brilliant head teacher. And you know the story. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do 1 year. And then 1 year turned into 3 years. And then by the end of those 3 years, I was set. I was like, this is what I want to do for the next part of my life. And I'm quite enjoying it. The kids that I taught then, I think also made a big difference in my life. We became quite close. And just seeing them thrive through education, seeing them make a difference. And then in contrast to me, being able to see them live that dream that they had. So I know my dream was to be a medical doctor, but now looking back, I don't think I would have been a good doctor. But with them, they were dead set as to what they wanted to do. It wasn't just, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer. It was like, I want to be a musician. And they went with that dream and they achieved it. So that made me sit down and think, wow, I want to do this for the next part of my life. I want to do this as long as I can, as much as I can.
Yeah, making a massive difference, isn't it? Incredible. And so and then were you there for 3 years or a bit longer? Because you were at a bigger school now, aren't you? What was that shift like? And you've taken on some
So
leadership position now.
yes, so I was there for 3 years. And then in those 3 years, as I said, it was quite a small school. So it meant that for me, in terms of my leadership journey now, it made it a bit easier for me to grow as a leader. I think small schools are quite, I don't know, from my perspective, it might be different for other people. But for me, I felt being in a small school and in a school where everyone thrived, teachers and students, I felt gave me a massive platform for me to step on into leadership. Because it was just right after my second year when my head teacher came to me and said, I think, to be honest, you can pull off being a deputy head, and there will be a deputy head post coming up soon. I think you should apply for it. And I looked at him, I'm like, I am 2 years into my career. What are you saying? That's crazy. And he's like, no, give it a shot. I think you could be really good at it. And I applied for it and I got it, to my surprise. But I think looking back, I could have done a better job, but I did the best that I could because of the setting, because it was quite a small school, quite intimate. And as I said, everyone thrived in the school and it enabled me as a leader to thrive.
Yeah.
And then just after 1 year, then I shifted schools to where I am now.
Amazing. I think you've really like hit on something there that I've definitely experienced, that small when you're in a small school, my experience is small village school in the UK, you because there are less of you, you need to
Mm.
step up and take that, more responsibilities are available to people at any stage of their career because actually there's no one else to do it. So you really have to share those things out in terms of if you're a leader, really distributing that. But then, I worked with sort of what we used to call NQTs here in the UK. We now call them ECTs, and they took on curriculum leadership roles, all sorts of personal development elements because there was no one else to do it. And they were amazing at it, but they certainly felt, I think, compared to their other colleagues who may be working in bigger schools, as you said, those opportunities were there for the taking. So it's interesting to see that difference of what you are kind of things that are opened up to you if you are in a small school.
Yeah, you've touched on an important point there because, like, I'm looking back and reflecting. You're right in the sense that there were moments whereby, let's say, for example, the head teacher is not around, is either sick or something's happened and he has to travel. He would just delegate and say, "Chilipo, you're doing this," and then you had no choice. You can't say. I think certainly in a bigger school, you can turn around and say, "No, there are systems in place. There's the deputy head teacher, they are heads of department. Why don't you ask them? That's their job. That's what they're paid to do." But in a small school, I don't even think we had heads of department in that school. No, we didn't. You had to do it. But I think for me, it's been one of the most important things that happened to my life because it enabled me to become a school leader early on in my life.
Amazing. So I'm really fascinated to find out about the challenges that leaders are facing across the globe. And one of the big drivers for wanting to talk to different people was to hear those voices about some of the things that we find challenging, and certainly here in the UK. we're in really tricky times in education. We're facing financial accountability, lots of special educational needs and disabilities challenges, lots of different things that are really hitting us hard. And I would be really fascinated to hear about the sorts of things that you are facing, and particularly in your role, the sorts of things that are challenging for leaders and for your school.
So just to give a bit of context in my current role, so I am a senior teacher, and it's quite funny because there's senior teacher, and then in brackets it says school community. So my job is vast. So there's sometimes people ask me to say, how do you do this? Because my role is especially being responsible for the community of the school. But one of the big things that I'm working on this year is introducing and pushing for the UN Sustainable Development Goals into the school. Last year, was it last year or 2 years ago, Malawi got hit by a cyclone. It came through Malawi, and it was not the first of its kind, but it was the first of its kind in terms of the devastation that it caused in the country. And this was a direct impact of climate change. And before then, I remember even I, being a science teacher, I would come and make claims like, oh, climate change is there, but we're sort of safe here in Malawi because we've got all these trees, we don't have that many industries, so we will be safe for a little while. And then we had this big cyclone that killed a lot of people, caused so much devastation. So that image stuck in our minds. And as a school, my current head teacher, she's amazing, came in and said, as a school, we need to do something about this. So one of the things she came in as a proposal was introduce the Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum with the purpose of changing the mindset of our students and teachers as well, and preparing them for a different world, a different future that they're going into, because it's no longer the same. We now face more natural disasters. We face much more wars than before. So just to prepare our students for that and hopefully enable them to become the leaders that would change that. So that's when my role came into play. So at the moment, in terms of challenges, your question was on challenges, was sort of pushing this sort of new agenda into the curriculum. Because if you look at most curriculums, they follow strict guidelines, and every department would have its strict policies as to what students need to be taught. And my current school is an international school, and our curriculum is based on the British system. So most of what we teach is based on the British curriculum. So now for me and school leadership to come in and say, all right, now you're teaching in Malawi, you're British, you're basing it on an international curriculum, but then can you throw in sustainable development goals in there? Was sort of gonna be like asking too much from teachers. So to drive that change, to come up with that vision and have teachers buy into it, and then eventually students buy into it, I found that quite challenging. So I think it would be the same in other contexts around the world, whereby I think just driving change, bringing in big changes, which are meant to be better for the school, is quite hard for a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is always going to be something that comes up, isn't it? That shifting change in mindsets, like that buy-in that you talked about, that's always such a long job. And I don't know, sometimes, I mean, I'm personally quite impatient, but recognizing how long some of these things take to really think about, have you got the culture ready for that change? Are people able to take that on board, and seeing that it's a long plan in place? Because actually, like you said, something like sustainability, thinking about climate change and understanding, not only is that a long journey getting people to implement it into curriculum, but also it's going to change, isn't it? So where we are as a world now, in 5 years' time, things will have shifted. So I guess creating something that has that flexibility to develop is going to be important as well, isn't it?
It is. It's a massive take or undertaking. But actually, at the same time, quite exciting, because I'm looking back now. We introduced the Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum in September. And yesterday, was it yesterday? It was Friday. On Wednesday, we had a life skills day. We call them life skills day here, whereby we spent the whole day just driving life skills curriculum into the school. And last Wednesday we were working on the sustainable development goals, and it was based on project-based learning, and just seeing all the students and staff excited and working on different projects. Every year group had a particular project that they had to work on. I just felt really emotional, I think, if I can say that.
Proud, I
Emotional,
bet.
that change, to see that buy-in from people. Of course, not 100%, but just seeing people really understanding why we need to do it, why we need to think about sustainability, why we need to be the drivers of change. Yeah, it's got me really emotional.
It's important, isn't it? I think, you talked about wanting to get into the job and education because you want to make a difference, and that's making a difference in individuals' lives. That you talked about, seeing people or young people living out their dreams and their visions, but being able to recognize that the work that you're doing now is about bigger change. It's about changing children's viewpoints so that the world can look differently. That's an incredibly powerful thing to be a part of. So that, as you were talking, I was really interested in, you'd mentioned having two great head teachers that you've kind of worked for previously, but maybe a bit more about them and how they inspire you, or just other people or ideas, I guess. I'm really keen to hear about what's inspired you and keeps you kind of going in that leadership sector.
I think for me, I keep going back to my secondary school, and I think, as I said earlier, having teachers that actually cared about my well-being and cared about me made a big change, had a massive impact in my life, and just that alone changed the way I viewed education, the way I viewed about my learning as a student, and my passion for it. So my first head teacher, as I said, was a brilliant head teacher in my first school. And his big thing was, if it's for the kids, let's do it. And whatever we did in the school, whenever you go in his office, and I even came up with a plan. If I wanted to push something into the school, I'd go, it's for the kids. And immediately he would say, all right, go for it. As long as it's for the kids, let's do it. So just seeing that, and then the impact that it had on the individual students at that school, and looking back and seeing how much they've done in their lives, individual lives, and in the world, made me realize that yes, being an educational leader and doing things for the kids, for the students, is quite important. So that's my first inspiration. And the current head teacher I have has sort of the similar philosophy, slightly bigger school, but I mean, just the example I gave about the cyclone, and then the immediate reaction is, let's prepare these kids, because the future they're going into is going to be different. It's going to be a scary world, but let's get them ready for that world. And then her decision making is always for the kids, for the betterment of the kids and their future. And it's always about, let's care for the kids, because that's what we're there for. We're there to educate the future generation, but we also need to show them that we care about their future. It's not just about teaching and learning or books or exams, but it's a bigger picture. It's about what kind of a world do we want to see, and what impact do we have as leaders who have got the power, sort of, I don't know if I can call it power, but influence and power to change that.
Yeah. And I think that idea is absolutely what we would expect all leaders to be saying. We're doing it for the children. I don't know necessarily your experience in Malawi of accountability pressures or kind of how that works, but I know there can certainly be some friction for leaders around, what they're being asked to do by wherever that pressure comes from, and whether really some of those things do make a difference for children. I think often that's where those frustrations can come in, because absolutely, if you are making decisions based on what's going to help the children to move forward, to be great adults when they grow up, to make a fantastic world, then that's going to be great, isn't it? And sometimes those frustrations can come in where things feel like they are done for somebody else, and thinking about who is it for is always going to be a really amazing reflective question for a leader, and if you're trying to make decisions.
And I think for certainly us in Malawi, we are lucky in a way, because government, yes, has got guidelines as to what we should be doing, and I guess again, government it says we should be doing it for the kids, but at the same time they allow a bit of flexibility as to how much we can adopt our curriculum, how much we could sort of influence change in our schools. Yeah, I think we are lucky in a way, and certainly lucky in my current school, because as being an international school, we are sort of independent in the way we do things, and hence why we're able to wake up one day and say, we want to push sustainability in the school, the sustainable development goals in the school, and here we are, a couple of months later, we are pushing it.
Amazing. Having that autonomy is a really powerful feeling, isn't it? And you can make really great change. So you talked about, going into leadership quite early in your career, and not necessarily that being the long-term plan, but that was, I think having great leaders who push you to do things is always amazing. What are your future plans? Like, what does the next 5 years look like in terms of leadership and things that you'd love to do?
I think next 5 years is the reason why I agreed to do this podcast. I think my journey as a leader here in an international school setting in Malawi, being Malawian and working in an international school based on a curriculum from a different country, is certainly unique in a way. And I remember when I had just started off, looking online to say, who can I find that I can seek advice from that I certainly would understand my situation, because it's quite a unique situation. But I couldn't find that many people. So I would want in the next 5 years to be that person that people can go to and say, I need help in this particular area. I don't know how to implement this in my school, or I don't know, I'm new to leadership in my current school. I don't know what to do. I wouldn't necessarily give them the answers, but sort of help them find the answers, sort of like coach them to be able to identify their own strengths. Because I think certainly for me, I was lucky that I had two brilliant head teachers who were able to help me identify my strengths and make me use them to my benefit. But certainly it's not the case for everyone. You do have cases whereby people work in a school that doesn't have that leadership that supports them. So having that platform or having that go-to person that is able to help you identify your strength or grow as a leader, I think is quite important. But I also at the same time, I'm quite passionate about education in Malawi and education in Africa. So I always say I want to be like an imaginary ambassador of education in Africa, because I think it's the what's the word? It's the key that we have to changing our continent and changing our individual countries. It's education and making people realize that education by Africa, for Africa, and for the whole world, like putting Africa in its position across the whole world is so important. Because I think for so many years, Africa has been that continent that's just been on the side. But I think personally, seeing the students that I've taught over the years and where they've gone and the things they've done, I want Africa to be on the world map and be recognized. And I think education is the right tool to do that.
Absolutely, so much power. I think absolutely, you for ambassador, Chilipo. Perfect. We'll put you forward. Put you forward. That's it. I'm gonna follow you over the next few years, and I'll see you in some glamorous governmental building soon, sharing your voice. It's so important, isn't it, to get out there and having that inspiration and that vision for the future, because education changes lives. We've just got to make some of those really good decisions within it. Thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible to speak to. Really loved hearing about it. If people want to find out more about you, is LinkedIn a good place to follow you on? You said you wanted to be there for people, and if they, I think, reaching out to find out about how things are working. So if people are in a position where they're new to leadership, or maybe they're, like you said, teaching a British curriculum, but in a different country, is that a good platform? Where do you normally hang out?
Yeah, no, I am mostly on LinkedIn. That's where we met actually.
Yeah.
Just randomly that's popped up on my LinkedIn, and I was like, I've been looking to do a podcast with someone and talk about leadership in Africa and working in an international school, and mostly about the sustainability aspect of my role. So I think it was a perfect find. So
things happen for a reason. Amazing. Okay, we will signpost people there. Fab. Thank you so much, Chilipo.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for all the work you're doing as well. I think it's quite important. I watched your first episode that you shared last week, and again, for me, it's quite important for me to hear leadership stories from other people and other parts of the world, and sort of it helps me, inspire me, and make me want to do more in my role.
It's just great, isn't it, to hear voices of other people? That's what I wanted, and I still do. I'm just fascinated in hearing people's journeys. So amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. We'd love to know your thoughts on this episode. Get in touch and tell us what you think, and share this episode with colleagues so we can spread the word. If you'd like some support with leadership coaching, supervision or consultancy, you can get in touch with me via the Stories of School Leadership Instagram account, or I'm Emma Lurie on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. It's info@emmalurie.co.uk. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're up to next, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. Goodbye.